Gladney Adoption Center having me here today. You guys, I just really want to take a little bit of time to share some tips, tricks, and thoughts around helping to build your child's self-identity and their confidence. This is specifically geared towards African-American children, especially those that are in transracial adoption homes or foster situations, whatever the case is. This just kind of gives some good kind of thoughts around what that would look like. I am the admissions director here at St. Philip's School and Community Center. It is located in South Dallas. We are an Afrocentric private Christian school. I know that is a mouthful. So what that means is about 98% of our students are African American. Same for our teachers and administration and leadership. It is all very much so highly representative of the student body. And one of the main things, I'm also a parent here. I have a 5th grader and a 6th grader as well. So I get to participate from a couple of different sides here at St. Philip's. But one of the key things that we focus on, even as an African-American focused school, is building our students' identity and their confidence in who they are, so that when they go into the world, we make it tough to be shakeable, that it is something that they are rooted in and that it is their foundation. So I'm going to share some of the tips that we utilize here at St. Philip's that I think will be beneficial to any organization or family that is loving on sweet babies from the African-American culture. So 3 areas that we're going to focus on will be self-care. So talking about hair, skin, general health and well-being, self-confidence, so character development, establishing goals and values, and then cultural history, so understanding racial identity and how that impacts their community and the communities around them. Please know that if you have questions throughout the presentation, drop them into the chat. Nancy's going to help me monitor those to ensure that I am answering your questions along the way. And we'll also have a Q&A time towards the end as well. Okay, so starting with self-care, we're going to talk about establishing healthy routines and doing that to instill their positive self-image for your kiddos. First tip. One key thing to help your child build strength in who they are, or when it comes to their hair care, it is understanding the history of assimilation. So in the African-American culture and in our history here in the United States, it has been hard to feel confident in our hair because from the minute we were freed, so from the minute our ancestors were freed, there were still even very specific standards of beauty. So the standards of beauty were based on the European standards of beauty. So that was straight hair, that was fair skin, that was very distinct facial features, and that did not match the African standards of beauty. And so certain stigmas were built around hair. And those stigmas spoke to if the hair is in its natural state, meaning as it was grown out of their head, that was considered unkept. And so you'll see, if you look through images from starting around the 80s and 90s, and even later, you'll see either Black women with wigs on that depicted, straight hair, or they relaxed their hair, or their mom would take a hot comb to their hair, whatever they could do to put their hair under control, quote unquote control. So trying to straighten their hair as much so that, again, it met the European standards of beauty, and then would also feel acceptable in society, at work, and professional settings. Well, a lot of those stigmas, I'd say over the last 10 to 15 years, have been intentionally being broke down. One piece of policy and legislation that was passed was the Crown Act. This was based out of California, and it actually it creates a sense of you no longer able to discriminate against someone because of the natural state of their hair. So you can no longer lose a job because your hair is considered unkept. So probably 15, 20 years ago, my hair, which is in locks, would be considered unkempt because of it's not straight, it's not flat or ironed, or I don't have a wig on my hair to depict that European standard. Whereas now, as education and as knowledge and as, you know, styles have changed and thoughts around hair care have changed, I can now walk into businesses, meetings, organizations with my with my locks and my hair and feel confident about who I am and know that that's not going to be a hindrance. So first thing, break down all the standards, understand or break down all of the stereotypes and understand where those stereotypes are rooted in so that you can speak confidently to your kiddos about their hair. Develop a routine when it comes to hair care. When it comes to African-American hair, it is so crucial to have a routine. I mentioned earlier that I'm a mom to two sweet babies in 5th and 6th grade. They'll always be my babies. I don't care how old they get. They're in 5th and 6th grade, and we have a routine. Every 2 weeks is hair care time. So we wash, we deep condition, we moisturize, we oil scalps, we will we'll do their steaming of their hair, and then we'll do what we need to do to put it into a style. That typically takes about 2.5 to 3 hours per head. So it is a day. Hair care day is a whole day of dedicated time to ensure that we are ready for the next 2 weeks, because that hairstyle typically stays in their hair for about 10 days to 2 weeks. My youngest one, her grade of hair is a little bit wavier, and so it doesn't hold the style as much as my older one, whose hair has a little bit more of a curlier texture. And so I have to kind of, that 10-day to 2-week time period depends on the texture of their hair. Now, my youngest recently decided to start her own lock journey. And so she has had her hair locked for probably the last 6 weeks. And so that has been a huge time saver for me, her decide. I let her decide that on her own. She had been talking about it for about a year or so. As she watched me start my lock journey about 4 years ago. And so she decided that she would like to lock her hair. She's 10. And so we started that process with her. So thus, I only have one head that I am doing a weekly routine or a bi-weekly routine with right now. And even that one, I've started putting into braids. So that was new, is that we get to a hairdresser who can put them into braids. And that typically lasts for about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on what her, you know, cheer and athletic schedule looks like, and how, you know, it's keeping her hair intact or not. But having a routine makes it so that it doesn't feel like a chore. Your kiddos will know, hey, we got hair care time on this day, and it's every 2 weeks we put it on the calendar. They know it's coming up, and we make it fun. It's like a day in the beauty shop at the house. And so making it not a chore is really, really important to getting through it with the least amount of tears. Next, finding products that meet your child's needs. I will tell you that over the last 10 and 11 years of my children's life, and over the last 42 of mine, we have all changed hair care products depending on whatever is going on with our texture of our hair, whatever, if our hair starts to get stagnant, whatever the case is, we have had to shift and change hair care products to meet the needs of the hair. It's the same with, like, you know, your skin, or, you know, medicines, or whatever the case is. Certain things were working for a time, it's no longer working. Same thing happens with the hair. It was working for a time, it's no longer doing what it used to do. And so finding the right hair care products are really important, and they need to meet the texture. They need to match the texture of your kiddo's hair. When it comes to curl patterns and moisture retention and the different texture that your kiddo's hair can come in the African-American community, it is important to know that the products match the texture. And I had to figure this out even as I was going into my young adulthood and college. I got into college. That was the first time I was responsible for doing my own hair. By the summer after my freshman year, I had no hair on my head. Like, I had burned all the, like, I was putting box perms. Like, it was just crazy. My mom was like, okay, so you're not able to do your hair. You're not ready. So we're going to go ahead and cut it off. And so I did. I had like about 1 inch of hair on my head, and it was manageable for me. It was perfect for me. But learn your kiddo's hair, learn their texture. There's several resources on here. I'll make sure that Nancy has this presentation so she can get it sent out to you guys. Go through some of these different links and resources to really get a deep understanding of what your child's hair care needs are. And that should help you with determining which products to use as well. The next thing, age-appropriate styling. So whenever you're looking at different styles and looks, find the one that's right for your kiddo's age. So for my 10 and 11-year-old, whenever we were looking at different styles, even as my youngest is now shifting into locks, I let them look. They send me about 5 or 6 images that they like, different pics of styles, and then we kind of narrow it down to one that I feel that is the right appropriateness that also fits, you know, their personality and whatnot, that I know that they'll really like. But be careful of styles that are too mature. There are certain styles that'll be meant for a young adult, an older adult, that your littles, your mid-teens or pre-teens might be interested in. It's okay to just say, nope, that's going to be a little too mature. Let's look at some other options. Some things to think about. So braiding, which is one of the things I mentioned that my oldest is now doing, is we put braids in her hair. That's a really good simple style that's easy to manage and that's age appropriate. Silk pressing gets a little bit more mature. It's essentially straightening the hair in such a way that in my opinion, it could just look a little too old for their age. For your 15 and up, your teenage and up crowd, absolutely, because you can still style it in ways that are age appropriate. Extensions come in all sorts of forms and styles. So again, do your research on what those extensions look like, and know what's going to be a good fit for the child's age. Using techniques that reduce pain and discomfort are really important. One key thing, and this is probably the best tip that I received as I was learning to do my kiddos' hair, is when it comes to detangling, because you do have to detangle the hair, is start from the bottom. Start from the root. I'm going to try to find my camera because I got 2 cameras going right now. There we go. Start from the tip of the hair and start detangling from here. Do not detangle and start from here. The amount of tears you will see will be unimaginable. It will hurt and it will be really uncomfortable, and it'll also break their hair off. So start with the detangling from the tip of the hair and then just work your way up until you've got a whole section that you can comb through and brush through easily. The image here on the screen, you see the sweet little girl has her hair parted in 3 different sections. That's a really good technique. Go ahead and part. I typically do 4 sections, so 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and we detangle 1 section at a time, starting from the root. Any questions about the hair care tips and techniques? Oh, somebody can go to view at the top right.
Yeah, so if you can't see Darnetta, if you guys will go to the view at the top right of your screen on Zoom, and then you can do your own, how you want to set up her camera. So there should be like 3 different boxes, 1 for me, 2 for Darnetta. And hopefully you'll be able to view and see what she's saying about the hair. Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Nancy. Awesome. Okay. Next piece, skincare. So when it comes to skincare, one of the key pieces that you're going to be looking at is using gentle, purifying, cleansing products. Similar skincare needs as, any melanated skin is going to need, but there's certain key things to be really mindful of, which is dryness. Make sure darker melanated skin is going to need additional moisture. It tends to work best as soon as they get out of the bath, as soon as they get out of the shower, giving them a good lotioning, so that gives them that protective layer through the evening. And then even after, depending on the harshness of water, after they've washed their hands, they may need to reapply the moisture and lotion to their hands as well. Melanated skin as well needs SPF sun rays. So that SPF sun protectant is really, really crucial to protecting their skin. Although more melanated skin can take the sun, it's just a part of the natural way those from African cultures, their skin was intended to be able to take the sun, and it was their additional melanin was created as a barrier of protection. We still need to have the sunscreen on the skin to assist with that. Also consider different skin conditions. So eczema, which still shows up just as it does on any other, in any other culture, any other race. The eczema conditioning, whatever those creams are, please make sure that you're using them on the kiddo's skin to ensure that it is protecting from their skin. Another thing to consider is the different oil production in the face, as well as in the body, and what those adjustments may need to look like. And so if you are, if your African-American child is in a transracial home, be mindful that the products that work on one family member may not necessarily work on the other. And that can, that's across the board, but just be mindful that there might be certain reasons to do the melanated skin complexion that is causing them to need a different product in terms of their skincare. The last piece I want to emphasize when it comes to skincare is just making sure that they know that no matter the shade of their skin, no matter how little or how much melanin is in it, that it's beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. It is the way, God intended it to be, and letting them know and showing them why it is beautiful, and helping them understand what that means. So I will share with you, like growing up, I was the darkest complected one in my family. Everyone else was a little bit more like brown to caramel complected. And I struggled trying to figure out jokes that weren't exactly funny at school in child age that was in reference to my skin tone as I got older, learning to love the shade of my skin, learning to appreciate the shade of my skin, and being comfortable in my own skin as well. And so books, there are tons of books and resources that you can access that talk about different skin complexions, that talk about different hair colors, styles, and all the different things. And I encourage you to find those books, especially for the littles, so they can grow up understanding that they are individually made and beautifully created as they are, all the way up until they are, have a certain level of confidence. It will build their confidence that no matter what anyone says, and I guarantee you, they will come across somebody who is going to say something about their skin, their race, whatever it is, the unfortunate situation in society that we live in, someone is going to address it. But to have them so rooted in who they are that it's unshakable, I tell my girls, it's going to sound as crazy to you as if somebody calls you a refrigerator. If somebody just says, hey, you're a refrigerator, your skin looks like a refrigerator, who's going to look crazy in this situation? Not you. Who's going to be the person who called you a refrigerator? Because you're obviously not a refrigerator. You're standing there in front of them as a whole human being. You're not a refrigerator. But that's the way I want you to interpret anyone who calls you outside your name, who makes a joke about the color of your skin, the texture of your hair. It needs to sound just that ludicrous that you could just say, okay, and you just walk off unfazed, and do not allow it to take root in your heart or in your mind at all. So just making sure that you emphasize the beauty of who they are, and the importance of their skincare and healthcare routines. Check the chat for any questions there. Okay, awesome. Okay, wonderful. Okay, self-confidence. So establishing an exceptional sense of self. Oh, hold on, I think I went back one. One more tip in the skincare and healthcare before we go into self-confidence. When it comes to the healthcare piece is be careful, select a conscious care provider. Unfortunately, there are still certain belief systems in our medical practice around the African Americans' tolerance to pain. And that's rooted in a lot of history and a lot of practice on slaves when it came to medical growth, and as they were trying to continue to evolve medicine, a lot of practices were done on slaves without anesthesia, without proper tools, and there was a full belief that African Americans can handle pain more so than their other counterparts, and thus don't need as much pain medicine. Their ailments aren't taken as seriously. And so be careful that whenever you are presenting your babies, especially as they get older and they're in that teen to young adult in college, and they're trying to explain to you or whoever the parent is that someone's not believing them, understand that they may not be getting believed because of that belief that, hey, you might be exaggerating your pain, you're fine, when there is something truly ailing that child. And unfortunately, the practitioner in front of them is a believer of the belief that African Americans either exaggerate their pain or can deal with pain more so. So advocate for your child, teach them to advocate for themselves, choose conscious care providers. that understand the differences in just the African-American, skin and practices, that although internally our bodies are all the same, there are certain things, even finding veins can be difficult because of the melanin of the skin. So that can cause challenges sometimes. So making sure that you have practitioners who feel comfortable in that process is going to be really, really important. I cannot tell you enough to make sure that you speak up for that kiddo, no matter what their age is. And if you do not feel comfortable, if you do not feel that that practitioner is doing the best they can by your child, be okay with walking away and stopping in, even in the middle of whatever's going on. If you do not feel comfortable, just stop and say, hey, I'm not feeling comfortable, and take your baby and go ahead and walk out and find a better place. That might sound crazy in the moment, but what will be worse is an accident because somebody did not know how to do what they were doing due to your child's darker complexion or whatever the case is, especially if there are certain traits like sickle cell anemia is a trait specific in the African-American community. If they're not familiar with that trait or what that does or how that presents, then certain diagnoses can be misdiagnosed due to that lack of knowledge. So just making sure that they understand those practices and certain pieces of that are really crucial. So there's a couple of resources on this page. Again, going back to the survey, medical students believe African-Americans feel less pain, understanding where that belief system comes from, and then the systematically undertreated for pain, understanding where that comes from and how you can address that for your kiddos. Right. Okay, so then we are diving into how to develop that identity and who they are. You're going to have to be really intentional. Even as an African-American parent, I was very intentional when it came to certain books that I purchased, certain shows that the girls were watching, representation, and even as they were, before they even got to St. Philip's, representation in the different things that I presented in front of them. So their dolls, their the toys that they played with. Again, going back to the shows and the things that they were listening to, I wanted them to see that, hey, there are people in this world that look just like you that are doing phenomenal things. So whether that's, Doc McStuffins having that representation, which I think that might be a little outdated now, but whatever that looks like, making sure that you're intentional in setting them up in that way. The next piece is social emotional learning. One of the things that are a taboo and a stigma in the African-American community is mental health. It is something that we are, and so many people are working towards destigmatizing the mental health piece, but social emotional learning is rooted in mental health. So providing your child with ways to know how to calm themselves, to be able to identify feelings, to be able to name those feelings and know that those feelings aren't them, it's just in that moment, but giving them different practices to be calm and build that emotional intelligence is really important. I will tell you one of the reasons why it's really important is because as your child gets into school, as your African-American child gets into school, unfortunately, more African-American children are sent to detention or sent to in-school suspension or expelled due to behavior than their counterparts. So they are expected to be able to manage their emotions out the gate, whether it's developmentally on track or not, whether a 2-year-old or 3-year-old should be able to manage their emotions and are still learning. The expectations are higher, unfortunately. And I encourage you to look through research and statistics that support that. So teaching your children early on how to do that, and then holding the adults accountable in their world for knowing what that child should be doing versus why you're expecting my child to do something more so than their counterparts is also really important. Again, it's going to go back to advocating for your children wherever they are, and knowing that they're going to bounce into people who do not see them in the same beautiful way in which you see them simply because of the color of their skin. So teaching them certain skills and know how to manage that is going to be extremely helpful for them. Identify their talents and passions. Find out what they love. This is good for any baby, for any child from any background. Identifying their talents and passions and knowing what they love is really, really a great way for them to build their confidence and understand who they are and understand all the different skills and traits and all the giftings that God has placed in them. Encourage their curiosity. Children are just baby scientists out the gate. So helping them continue to encourage their curiosity, Learning more so that you can show them more and so that you can teach them more is also a really crucial piece, so that as they ask questions, and they're gonna, as they get older, there's gonna be more questions. There's gonna be more culture questions. There's gonna be more identity questions. So not being afraid to answer those questions is gonna be really important to helping them as they continue to build and understand who they are and be encouraged in who they are. Practicing those self-affirmations, boundary setting, establishing values, knowing what is important in your home, and knowing how you want to make sure that they understand what's important in your home, and setting those values is really important for them to, again, it comes back to their identity, who they are. We have certain things in our home that, you know, our kiddos are like, well, mom, so-and-so does this. Well, not in the Forteau home. In the Forteau home, we don't do that. In the Forteau home, this is what that looks like. And so knowing that they understand that there are certain things we do in our home, and that's okay if somebody else is doing something different in their home, but understanding that these are our values and these are our belief systems. And then teaching them how to set boundaries. Like for 2 little girls, helping my daughters know how to be okay with saying, no, I don't feel comfortable with that. Or saying, hey, this is where my limit is going to help them as they become young adults on into whole adulthood, and knowing that it helps them remove that anxiety around, well, I don't want to make somebody upset if I say no. It is okay. If you don't feel comfortable, please say no, and allowing them to know what those boundaries are is really, really important to building that identity, and knowing that I can say no to you touching my hair. I know my hair looks different than your hair, but I don't want you to touch it because I don't feel comfortable. And so giving them that level of confidence, or no, I don't want you to rub my arm because it looks different than your arm. I don't feel comfortable with that. And giving them that confidence to be able to say that is going to set them up for success as they continue to grow and get older. And then always setting and achieving goals. So as young as 1, 2, and 3, you can set a goal and help them achieve that goal. So those practices, again, carry on with them on into their young adulthood and into adulthood. So don't be afraid with taking those pieces of achieving and setting, and starting young with that. There's not an age that they must get to start those practices. It's good to start early as well. Let me see any questions as we go in from there. Okay, awesome. Okay, so then cultural history. So using knowledge of the past to inspire the future. This is the part where the more you know, the more curious they get, the better you're equipped to answer some of those questions that you're going to see come down the pipe. A lot of this becomes really, it starts to kind of show itself as they get older. So as they're in those preteen, teen, college years is when a lot of this really is important to be able to set them up for success, so that they are not shocked by society, unfortunately, that they're not shocked by it, and know that this is not the whole, that there are people who have certain beliefs that the rest of the world doesn't believe, the rest of the society doesn't believe, but know that there are people that have these beliefs. And then unfortunately, these beliefs have created certain systems in our society that were not set up for their success, but helping them navigate what that looks like so that they're not feeling dejected in those moments. So when it comes to discussing race and racism, don't be afraid to be candid, but making sure that's age appropriate. It's one of the things that we practice in our home is that, yes, there are going to be conversations and scenarios and situations that will come about. So let me show you how to have those conversations and how to respond to them in a way that keeps them, in a way that allows them to be true to themselves without going against their values and their beliefs. So having those conversations, being sensitive to the topics, and again, being able to equip your children is going to be really crucial to them being able to see beyond those moments that will happen. So I'll tell you, I didn't get my equipping till way later in life. So my parents were born and raised on the south side of Chicago, and then joined the military and ran as far away from Chicago as possible because it was tough, it was hard, and they did not want their kiddos to experience a lot of the challenges that they experienced. in their upbringing. So we were raised on the whole other side of the world in the military. And I would say they kind of did a 180 in the sense that we weren't introduced to a lot of things racially. We didn't grow up with our family in the South Side of Chicago, where my parents were just like, we just don't want them to experience any of it. And so thus, there are conversations that weren't had in the home that I didn't know till later on. And so when I had my first like in my face racial experience, I was 19 and super confused. I was caught off guard. I didn't know what was happening. It felt like I was having an out of body experience. And I said, well, I never want that for my kiddos. I want them to know not to be looking, we're not looking for these moments, but we want them to be prepared for those moments. Because unfortunately, no matter how much you want it to not happen, someone's going to have an ignorant thought and they're just going to let it fly out their mouth. And so in those moments, how do we prepare our children when that happens? Typically happens later on in those pre-teen, teen years, but it's not unseen to happen in the elementary years as well. So teaching them and preparing them for those topics. Teaching your child about civil rights, social justice movements, teach them about the history. It gives great pride. It gives great pride in who they are. It gives great pride in the shoulders of who they stand on, those that came before them, those that fought for the rights that they have right now. Teach them all about that. Teach them about the way in which that will impact their citizenship and impact who they are and how they feel about themselves. One of the amazing things that we do here at St. Philip's is every fifth grader goes on a civil rights trip. They do a 5-day trip. They go through 4 different cities. They move from Tennessee at the Lorraine Museum, where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. They move all the way down to Georgia, where they visit a couple of different HBCUs. So they go see HBCUs, or historically Black colleges and universities. So they see Spelman, they see Morehouse, and then they go to civil rights museums where they do presentations. They walk across the Edward Pettus Bridge, which is where Bloody Sunday took place. I encourage you to look up all of these things in history because it will impact who they are today and why things look the way they do systematically today. And then they end with Vicksburg in Mississippi. And when my then 10-year-old came home after that trip, just in awe, like she came up, Mom, did you know? Did you know? Did you know? Like she had this sense of pride that I could not have done it on my own, because that was a big thing that they were able to take the kiddos on, and they do it every year. They've been doing it for over 20 years, and the kiddos come back with a completely different sense of self that teaches them everything that I'm hoping I'm getting in pieces around those that paved the way for them to be where they are right now, and for me to be where I am as mom, and as working here at St. Philip's and all the different things that have taken place, being able to see that history. So don't be afraid to find the books, to read the stories, the shows that touch on civil rights and justice movements, and then believe them when they share their experiences with you. Please, please, please. If they feel uncomfortable in a space, there's something that's probably making them feel uncomfortable in that space. So I encourage you to believe them whenever they share those thoughts and those concerns, because oftentimes it's rooted in something. They're sensing something, whether it's a microaggression that they're sensing, which to share microaggressions, they're not just as overt as calling you out your name or being, very specific, but it can even be as simple as, oh my gosh, you just speak really, your speech is, you speak so well. You just speak so well. Like the surprise and audacity that you speak so well. Like those are microaggressions that aren't necessarily even intentional, but can do something, because it can make you feel like, oh, am I not supposed to speak this articulate or have such a command of the English language? Like it can make you have a little piece of self-doubt in your abilities. And so when they come to you, especially again, as they get older, they'll start to identify these discomforts in certain scenarios and situations. Don't discount it. Believe them whenever they share those occurrences with you. A couple of resources around discussing race and racism. There's so many different books that support the conversation, so I encourage you to look those up. And then another one around white parents, Black children, and the different lessons that can be learned from parenting a Black child in a transracial home as well.
Darnetta,
Yes.
we have a lot of interest in the 5th grade civil rights trip that St.
Yes,
Paul.
absolutely.
Would you mind telling us the different stops that they make? And I'm going to write that in the chat.
Absolutely. So they start in Tennessee at the Lorraine Museum. So that's the first stop. And so they get to hear the whole history of the Lorraine Motel that is now the Lorraine Museum, and get to go through that entire presentation. And then they drive to Georgia, and they're in Atlanta. And so they go to the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta, as well as Morehouse and Spelman College, which are the HBCUs, and one's a men's college and the other one's a women's college. They're all within like a small radius of each other. So they split the groups up, and the girls go to Spelman, and then the boys go to Morehouse, and they get a whole campus tour. And then they head to Alabama. They go to Birmingham. So they go to Birmingham, Alabama, and there's another spot in Alabama that I'm missing. I will send it to you, Nancy,
Okay.
to let you know. But then they walk across the Edward Pettus Bridge, which is, it's rooted in Bloody Sunday, which is when a busload of civil rights activists were trying to shine a light on the racism and disparities in Alabama. And the Edward Pettus, who was the sheriff at the time, he wouldn't let them cross the bridge. And so they got out the bus, and a really, really brave white counterpart got off the bus first, took the brunt of the hits, while the rest of them got off the bus and continued to try to make their way across the bridge. And it was very violent. It was a very violent scene, but it so many news, it went nationwide, it went global, and really put a lot of information and eyes on what was going on, so that it can start making room for change on policy and politics there. And so our kiddos actually walk that bridge, which is, I'm trying not to get emotional, just the thought of it, because they're walking a bridge that their ancestors weren't allowed to walk. And so it's just an awesome experience for them to go through. And then they go to Mississippi, they go to Vicksburg, and they go to, and there, I'm trying to remember, there's a couple of museums there in Vicksburg that they get to see. And the amazing part is all the pre-work that's done on the front end is that the kids have done research on the different places they're going, and then they present. So they present in the museums, they present on the bridge, they do presentations in those different spaces to kind of share their knowledge and understanding of what took place. So it's a phenomenal 5-day experience.
That is amazing. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so then the next piece is around establishing a sense of pride. I cannot tell you enough that reflection matters. So where they can see themselves, they can imagine themselves being. So whether that's their doctors, whether that's their dentists, their teachers, in the toys that you select, in the books that you select, reflection matters. So that they can see a sense of who I am and say, you know, I can be that. That person has the same hair as me. That person has the same skin as me. Oh my gosh, their mouth and their nose is just like mine, and feel a sense of I'm not alone in the space. And so reflection is a big way to build pride. And then emphasizing and participating in traditions of the culture. So Juneteenth, Kwanzaa, a Black church. I encourage those experiences, whether your church, especially when it comes to the Black church, it is an experience. It is an experience. A lot of the hymns are based in old Negro spirituals that slaves sung to just get themselves from day to day. So that experience is phenomenal. And I will tell you, the Black church is probably one of the most amazing, welcoming churches when it comes to visitors. So I encourage you to, if you are a part of a church community, to experience that, if for nothing else than for the sake of the babies that you're loving on. And then also Kwanzaa, which is a holiday experience around the Christmas time. There's tons of Kwanzaa fests that you can find and that you can experience with your kiddos during the holidays. And then Juneteenth, I'm really excited that over the last 2 years, Juneteenth was made a national holiday. And so that happens in June, and it is the day in which Texas slaves, so slaves in Texas, discovered they were freed. So slaves in Texas didn't learn until 2 years later, after Emancipation Proclamation was passed, that they were free. And so it is, and that happened in Galveston, is where the first notice came. And so Juneteenth was launched in Galveston and has grown across the state of Texas from that time, and has become an annual celebration in the African-American culture of freedom. And so I encourage you to participate in those traditions and teach your kiddos about those traditions as well. And then the last piece here is just all about creating community. So finding ways for them and yourself to have a sense of community around understanding the different resources. So whether that's family in places like your school, your job, your friend groups, your places of worship, finding a sense of community and support. There's tons of transracial adoption groups, transracial adoption organizations and meetups that you can participate in to learn different tips and tricks and know-how. Again, the whole part of rearing and raising an African-American child is doing it in a sense of community. Don't try to do it alone. Don't try to do it without support. That is just, and I'll tell you, that's a life thing where no one's made to be an island. We're all meant for community and connection. And so building connection in ways that can help build identity and build a sense of self for your kiddos it takes intentionality. So find those communities, find those groups, and we encourage you to make those connections. The last piece I want to share is that as we are St. Philip School and Community Center, we would love to be a partner. So if you know of any schools, any families, we have a nice, and it's a growing community of transracial adoption families here at St. Philip's they have just made the intentional choice to partner with St. Philip's for their child's culturally aware and sense of self growing for that child and that process for them. And so if you know of any families or yourself are interested, always reach out to us. We'd love to share how we do that here in St. Philip's and what that partnership looks like.